Welcome back to the Skits and Giggles podcast. I am Pascal, chief instigator of this show and your host. I'm joined by my co-host and the resident engineer, the yin to my yang, the Bugs Bunny to my Daffy Duck, Bryson. How's it going today?
Pretty good, Pascal. What's up, Doc?
I'm all good. Thanks, man. I'm really looking forward to continuing our little Zermatt theme that we've got going over the last couple of episodes. I know the guys that have been following along with the Skits and Giggles podcast for a while, they know that, we've talked to a couple of guys already that this has been a pretty critical event. So we had Anna on episode 7, I believe, and the race was a very interesting experience for her. She learned a lot about latex gloves. We had Jan and Dario on that took... the photo of the year on Pink Bike in Zermatt after the race. We already talked to Lukas Huppert, who also made his seminal appearance at an enduro race, and he had a very interesting story to tell as well. And that's why, we were pretty stoked that we can actually talk to the race director and the course designer of the race in Zermatt, in the shadow of the magic mountain, the Matterhorn, Nik Wicki. How's it going, Nick?
Hey, good. I'm psyched to be here. Thank you, Pascal and Bryson.
Well, we also have to thank you to do this podcast in English. It really means a lot to us to be able to do this, and we are really looking forward to this conversation. Also, it's yet another Friday night recording, and we have to do a quick beverage check. So, Nick, what have you got?
I'm sitting here with the White Frontier Raspberry Melba, which is a sour beer. It's one of my wife's favorites. So don't tell her that I stole one of those.
Bryson, so far you've been 50-50 on the old fun factor. What have you got tonight?
Well, I can't let my streak down, so I'm going with some original Burner Aqua.
Ooh. Which vintage? Current?
I don't know. It dates pretty far back. Unknown.
Nice. Right. Well, I'm sticking to my Amundsen New England IPA, and which has been a reoccurring theme on this podcast as well. Well, we've got all the beer talk out of the way already, so let's get down to business and do our quick spiel with the social and where you guys can find more information about the Skits and Giggles podcast. We are currently most active on Instagram, where you guys can skid right into our DMs and follow along at Skits and Giggles. And you can find our website with all the relevant links and info under the URL skitsandgiggles.com. Also, if you guys like what we're doing and want to follow along, just give us a follow on Spotify. Hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen to great podcasts. Right, with all of this out of the way, let's talk about Zermatt. I've been to Zermatt twice, both times to race. I have my stories and memories to tell. But Nick, from your perspective, certainly from last year, 2020, a memorable vintage of this race. What were your highlights?
Yeah, definitely the highlight was when, the last rider crossed the finish line and... everything went over rather well, even though all the signs were, pointing in a different direction at the beginning of that weekend. But I mean, no, in general, it's been a huge learning curve for the whole team, and we were still super stoked to have been able to pull off the first ever EWS E, on Thursday and Friday. Overall, super positive, outcome. Also, in a Corona year and so on with the weather. Yeah.
Oh, what was so special about the weather? I can't remember. I was too frozen.
Your memory compartment was frozen, so you'd have no recollection of that.
Probably.
So yeah, for the ones who haven't been there or haven't listened to the podcast, we knew that Saturday and Sunday, which were training and race day, are going to be cold and wet. And yeah, we actually had snow on race day and all over, like even on Saturday, horrible conditions to train in, freezing cold and wet.
Yeah, Saturday was mostly wet and Sunday was mostly cold.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was it's a race in the Alpine and stuff like that. Unfortunately, you have to prepare for. But maybe coming back a little bit to your role, we said you're the race director and course designer. So maybe can you explain a little bit what your responsibilities are when it comes to organizing an EWS race weekend?
Yeah, maybe what a lot of people don't know or racers don't know is that the EWS is basically like a franchising system, if you want to call it that. And the local organizers, which would be, for example, Crankworks in Whistler, or we here, the Trail Off Festival in Zermatt, they actually put together the races, make all the calculations for the courses, put together the safety measures and so on. The actual course design, basically, as an organizer, we provide that to the EWS, and the EWS, they give a green light or a red light.
Okay. And are there specific rules in terms of what what kind of difficulty the trail needs to be, or what kind of features it needs to have, and etc.?
It's not so much about the difficulty itself. It's more about the overall, we call it like the overall function of the whole course, which means, okay, how long is each individual stage? How long are they together? There is certain times. For example, a EWS race can't be shorter than 20 minutes overall. A stage, shouldn't be shorter than 2 minutes, and so on. And the whole flow of the course has to work, which is getting more and more complicated because we're having more and more people racing. We're talking about 500, 600, 700 people. Like Whistler, for example, is a huge race. In Grand Montana this year, we're aiming for 500 people. It's less about really like how many corners can you put in there, and how big the drops can be, but it's more about the overall flow of the course.
Okay, and how, I guess one of the main challenges as a racer is to anticipate how the course and the trail is changing as practice progresses and as the race progresses. And of course, if you have, you said a number, if you have 500 racers and you have add conditions like we had last year in Zermatt, you add that to it, and the course is obviously changing quite dramatically from, even between the racers, depending on how things are going. So how do you anticipate that as a course designer? Do you pick specific trails, or do you have, some other strategies that you use?
Yeah, that's a really good question. For example, it's a bad idea to use new trails or actually, build trails, the week before the race. That can, bite you when the conditions are wet. So in general, it's a good advice to use, trails that have been packed already, that have been used already. And certain things like that you have to take into account. But I also have to say the course has to be designed in a way that it all works together, which means a lot of the EWS stages, special stages, are like combinations of individual trails, which means you have to link them somehow. And that's why we always or often see, bits on a gravel road, bits over a field and so on.
The good old mid-stage uphill sprint, the rider favorite.
Yeah, who doesn't like that?
Yeah, but coming back to maybe a little bit Zermatt as a venue. I mean, of course, we've heard from other guests already that it's a bit of a challenge to get to. Even for people that live in Switzerland, it's a long way to go, even in our small country. It's probably even worse for anyone that travels from afar. But the flip side to that is, of course, that you have some fantastic terrain and can put on, I think, a fantastic race. So what is from your perspective, what are kind of the main drivers to put on a race in a place like Zermatt? And how do you tackle those challenges of having difficult logistics?
I mean, that was a huge obstacle or something like to overcome for us. We're talking not only about the individual riders that arrive and have to arrive by train and can't drive to Zermatt with the car and so on, but we're talking about trucks and teams, like all the official teams that need a setup, that need to bring their cars, their mechanics, their whole workshop and so on. So that was one of our biggest challenges. It has a lot to do with making schedules, talking to the cantonal police for permissions, to the municipality for permissions, and so on. So it's definitely an added layer of complication to the organization, and which one thing that was very special was the first year we put it on in 2019. We had to talk to every team manager and really explain how it works, and also explain that we have this figured out if they come on time, if they are in this schedule. So very Swiss. Mm-hmm. and once they did all that in 2019, 2020 was way easier, because they knew how the procedures go. They knew that somebody was there when they arrive and so on.
Okay. Then you, as a slight complication in 2020, you just had Corona that had to add some complexity to a well thought through running order for people to stick to.
Yeah.
But how of course you had a little bit of leeway in terms of, or bit of a run into the event, so you kind of knew what you were getting into. Maybe just briefly, what were the main challenges of course the Corona situation and the safety measures that have to be put in place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, something that everybody is struggling at the moment is we don't have any way to really plan things, in the sense that we don't have any any way of knowing what's happening in 3 weeks. That was the case in the summer already, and what we did was we tried not to use too many resources, just for our own the health of the company and the festival, but we tried to basically cover all the basics, which means everything that had to do with the race we organized, and anything that had to do with the festival, surrounding it, we basically we didn't do much, or we couldn't do much. And the very good thing about the enduro racing and how it is to race, and with individual racers on the course and spread out over the whole day, we always knew that this was a good Corona. It could fit well into the Corona measures. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it was obviously true. With the it said the only the bottleneck from our perspective was a little bit with the gondolas and the funicular, but you just had to wait one, and that was fine. Maybe not to dwell too much on Corona, which unfortunately is still with us as we record this. But I think an aspect I'm really interested in, especially in the context of last year, and of course I also want to talk about the other editions, but maybe to wrap up 2020, is the whole safety aspect, right? So as a racer, it was, I was sitting in my accommodation waiting for the race to start. We got tons of emails from Natalie, the athlete liaison. So many actually that most of them landed in my spam folder. But and it wasn't quite clear what are the real bottlenecks. Why is it taking so long? Of course, yes, snow, but snow has never stopped anything. So maybe from your perspective, can you maybe explain why there were so many delays and then also cancellations, of course?
Mm-hmm. No, that's a very interesting question, and it's very different what happens behind the curtains and what we know, and what information we can work with, and what, for example, the riders know, or the spectators, and so on. And I think that is something that is really hard to manage. This communication. You want to communicate a lot, or so that it makes sense for everybody, but there are certain information that you can't, make public, if that makes sense. But maybe to elaborate on that a little bit, I can tell you like what the different steps were, and when or how we decided on them. So in general, the first thing you can, and the first thing you want to do is you take out the first stage, because that buys you not only time, but it buys you other resources. You have an additional stage manager. This stage manager has like timing managers and about up to 20 race marshals on the stage, plus an additional 1 or 2 first responders. So with that, you buy yourself a little bit of time, looking at the weather, talking to the Air Zermatt in our case, which do the aerial rescue, having meetings with the local fire department, which do the terrestrial rescue from the ground. So that's the first delay. We all know a stage doesn't take too long, so it doesn't buy you that much time, right? So it, all in all, it buys you maybe half an hour. You can maybe move the start an additional half an hour, so you have an hour to work with. We have Rory Cunningham and Chris Ball from the EWS, and we generally make these decisions together. Yeah. Then the next thing you want to look at is, in our case, we had a lot of fog, which made rescue by helicopter really hard, especially in higher altitude. It was a bit easier because the fog, was high enough that the helicopters can fly and see the ground. Maybe you remember the start of the first stage, basically just about below the fog. And
just in the snow.
Yeah, exactly, just in the snow. So what you do, or what we did, is you're looking at the course and you're looking at the spots where it's hard to get to, where does it take a long time to get to, and so on. So the next move was to shorten the stage 2, basically cut it in half, which left you guys still with a super hard track to ride, especially in the...
It was good fun.
in the wet. Yeah, if anybody hasn't checked out Jesse Melamad's POV of that run, that is sick. Yeah.
That's some fantastic riding.
Yeah. So then, as I said, you have resources, an additional stage manager with his whole crew that can move to these stages that are going to be open, and that means you have quicker response. If somebody happens, you have more medics, first responders on the stage, and so on. And we did that with another stage, which was very high, which we cut completely, and we basically only left in a fairly, safe stage in the sense of like accessibility for the rescue. And the last thing that you have to take into consideration is the rider's fatigue. So when it's cold, when the riders are exposed at the start and so on, you want them to not be out there for too long, which means you try to shorten the liaison, you try to shorten the waiting times, and so on. You give them an opportunity to go back to the hub, have dry clothes and so on. But then we also have to think about the EWS 100, which is the non-licensed category, which a lot of them don't have dry clothes there or somewhere to go and have a shower or whatever, right? So you can't have them waiting in town basically until they have to start. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's super interesting. But yeah, of course. I mean, from the perspective of the racer, I think I can just say thank you. I think it was despite everything, it was I think it was still a worthy race. Yes, it was pretty short. It was manageable. I did the 100. I didn't return back to my accommodation. I just did my start time, just went straight to the start of the second stage, did that, and then went back for the nice warm shower.
Yeah.
And of course, given the circumstances of the whole year, I think you pulled it off as good as you could, and I have to commend you for that. So well done. Bryson, you had something?
Yeah, to follow up on your first-hand praise on the way that the alteration was handled. Something came to mind when Nik was describing it. And as a director and course designer, are you creating as you create your course and your race? Are you creating some backup plan or extra strategy, some contingency, just like you did in 2020?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first meetings that we had with the EWS is there is an annual organizers meeting in Finale, and all the organizers meet and we share experiences and solutions and so on. And before we did the Continental Series in 2018 and the Helvetic Cup, we had this meeting. And one of the emphasis was like, don't show the gnarliest thing or the most exposed, like the most hard to get to trail and so on. Always think about the worst of scenarios, and you want to build up these backup plans. You want to know where can you get to, like where can the rescue team get to, and so on. And it's funny, like this, like people asked me like how did you make these decisions, in these couple hours? But it's not like that, when I stepped out of the shower at 5:30 in the morning, I knew what the options were, right? We didn't know what the actual weather would be like or the actual situation. But we had, plan B, C, D, and then, eventually cancellation was the very last resort. Yeah.
And comparing 2020 to 2019, which was your first EWS year, now 2020 you kind of took away, like you said, the festival portion, a large majority of it, and then you kind of went down to basics for the race. Knowing that you could have still pulled off a race with less resources, and then comparing that to 2019, where you basically it was your first shot and you really wanted to give it a full pull. Are you going to enter 2021 with sort of the kind of, I don't know, chip on your shoulder, like, yeah, we can pull this off easy if we just go easy street, or what's the approach for 21?
No, it's a nerve-wracking, time, the build-up to the race, and talking to the municipalities, and in the case of Gromontana, which we are gonna race this year, with the bike park and the trail builders there, and additionally, they all speak French, and my French is only good after about 2.5 pints, and it's nothing to be taken lightly. Of course, we have extremely good connections, to the Air Zermatt, Air Glacier, this kind of rescue team. We are working very well with Rory Cunningham from the EWS, which supports us in all like technical questions and so on. But it's, you definitely have to make plans for all the eventualities, and that's not to be taken lightly.
You already alluded to earlier to an interesting question. That's the the difference between the EWS, so the Elite, and the EWS 100. And of course, you have to design your course with 500 riders in mind, and only, let's say, 100 of those are elite riders. How do you approach designing the course, having those kind of two camps in mind? Are you sticking to, I want to make a great race for the elite, or are you also trying to showcase the beauty of the area with some more flowy trails?
Yeah, it's a really hard balance to keep, right? It's not everything that is fun to ride is fun to race, right? And we definitely were learning that lesson a lot from 2019. We always made sure that we had a good relationship with the riders, and that we would get their riders' feedback and so on. So you kind of start to get a sense of what's actually fun. For example, a big thing that you want to avoid, elite or amateurs, is like these uphills that you were talking about, because even if they are just let's say 20 meters, 30 meters, a light uphill, if you do that in race mode and sprint, and you're already like at your limit, that is not fun to ride. Is that correct, Pascal?
Well, I mean, it's one thing, but I've actually taken the time when I threw myself into EWS racing to read the technical rules, and the rules stipulates that 80% of the stage needs to be downhill, and the rest can be whatever it is. And I have a cross-country background, so I don't really mind the spicy little uphill. But what was, in terms of the challenging things that you've put into the race, I've done 2018 Zermatt as well, with the stage start on Trockenersteig, which is at 3,000 meters. And I found that much, much harder than any small uphill in another stage that's 1,000 meters lower. It's just the altitude and the excitement of a race start, and you sprinting, and 20 seconds into the stage you're breathing through your eyeballs, and so I think that's much, much harder. But again, on the balance, you would rather make the elite happy than the EWS 100.
Yeah, I kind of I always say that design the course for the elite. I mean, part of the appeal to race EWS 100 is to, as an amateur, to ride and race a World Cup track and World Cup course, and therefore I think it should be catered more to the elite, which is not to say you should do it as hard as possible, because if it's just jank, as the Rocky Mountain team likes to call it, it's it's not fun for anybody, right?
Okay. Well, speaking of the Rocky Mountain team, I saw on Instagram before the race, they obviously traveled to Zermatt a little bit earlier, and they were exploring the terrain a little bit. And I think they had some challenges with some of the rocks. What was the story there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some teams are more vocal about how they feel about a venue and the course. Some are a little less vocal, and we get a lot of rider feedback directly, like from the rider sport itself. But in some cases, as you mentioned, social media is faster, and our team, like the stage managers and all the people working on the stages and the trail builders, pick that up. And so this year we thought, okay, I think, or we thought it's a cool thing to actually respond and do something about it. So in that case that you mentioned, they were, talking about a specific rock, a specific place. And then, we sent some guys up from the local bike club and, made a little story, got rid of that rock. And at the end of the day, I mean, it's safer. It's probably nicer to ride. So it's good, yeah.
Mm. And it's an interesting aspect, right? We had the conversation with Jan Kadosh and Dario Lohner about their experience with the photo of the year. And one interesting thing they noted is that especially riders from North America, Canada, US, wherever, they don't really know or can appreciate kind of the heritage of the trails that we have here, and that. And then my response was, well, most of the people that have never been to Europe, they don't know that most of those trails, they are not purpose built. They are, have been around for a couple of 100 years. They've been used for farmers. They've been used for smugglers. They've been used by goats, etc. So it's not like they've been built janky on purpose to make it difficult for the racers. And then only recently we started building purpose-built mountain bike trails. And, and then maybe what is your perspective on kind of bridging that gap between, let's say international riders that are, used to maybe faster riding, flowier, more open trails, and quite frankly, some janky old alpine hiking trails that we have in Zermatt or in other alpine destinations.
Yeah, I think there is something to be said about all types and varieties of trails, right? I mean, you guys know this. It's just fun to have the variation. And that's why I'm super stoked to go to Gromontana, because they have some really flowy, almost jump line kind of like bike park bits. They have some old school downhill bits and some single trail, which I think at the end of the day, this is really cool if you can, have every stage feel different and have their own character. But obviously we were very concerned about, what's the standard for an EWS when it comes to the actual trail and so on. And what happens is that Chris Ball would, and now Rory Cunningham took his position. They actually visit the venues first. We presented, the possible trails, and in that visit, you're already talking quite specifically about, certain corners or certain, let's say, rock gardens or things that are, a no-go or a go. So you already have, like, you can build your image of what it should be. And then for the Helvetica race and Continental Series, Tracy Mosley was assigned to do the course checking. And for example, she was really pleased by how it went back to the roots, so to speak. and she said, "Oh, this is cool. This is again like alpine, and it's rough, and you have to be smart about your line choice and so on." So, and funny enough, a lot of the girls in the EWS, Katie Winton also was really pleased with the 2019 like course. Like they said it's really interesting to ride. You have to be focused and choose your line wisely, whereas a lot of the North American riders are used to something different and probably didn't have as much fun riding those trails.
Well, maybe to kind of wrap up the EWS discussion conversation. So after, let's say, 2.5 EWSs, so 2 full EWSs and a Continental Series 1, what were the kind of highlights for you personally out of those 3 events?
I would say that the first EWS, like when that race finished, and like just the energy that was in the team, like in the volunteers, the stage managers, and everybody, man, it's like I get goosebumps when I think about it. Like the last timing manager confirms over the radio that the race is over, that the last racer is in the finish or across the finish line. Like that was just incredible. That was really, really cool. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it looked like a fantastic race, and of course, in contrast to 2020, ideal racing conditions, probably almost a little bit too ideal. I mean, a little bit of rain always adds a bit of spice to a race.
Yeah, but, a little bit.
But just a little bit, but maybe not in quite to the same extent as last year. Bryson, do you have anything else?
Part of the appeal to me for EWS, other than pure mountain biking, is this idea of that I'm, like you said, I'm riding the track of the pros. And I could even, in some cases compare my time to them if I were to say, sign up for a 100. However, I think it's really the case of like gladiators and villagers. So I'm like one of the villagers who shows up and was like, rah, rah, okay, let's do this. But then really when there's that guy in the middle of the ring facing the bull and he, slays the beast, and I'm like, yeah, I could do it too. Probably not, but hey, I could give it a shot. How do you feel about racing? Are you a gladiator or are you a villager?
Oh man, I'm the spectator for sure. I'm
you want to be entertained.
One of the peasants, yeah. No, but actually, Bryson, you already mentioned, I think the cool thing about it is the inspiration, right? Like you look at them or you look at somebody, and I mean, it can be something very specific, how they take a corner, what kind of line, how much energy they still have, at the end of a stage. Like stuff like that is just inspirational, and I think that's what drives, the villagers, as you called them, to actually, follow the circus and, race themselves. It's fantastic.
You guys might have met somewhere in the mountains at one point. Isn't that correct, Pascal?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think Nik, he made some experience how a race goes down in the snow at the Enduro too.
Absolutely.
I mean, you said you like to be entertained. You're a peasant, a spectator, but that didn't look like spectating at all the last time I saw you race a bike. So what is that trip to Davos like?
Yeah, that was also something I won't forget. And it's funny, you know what? In 2019, we had a conflict of dates with the Enduro 2, or Enduro teams as it's called now. And we couldn't move our date. So they moved their date. And as you remember that, we got snowed in at that race, and then 1 year after it was the other way around.
Payback.
Yeah, exactly. Davos was beautiful to race, and we had the bad weather. But yeah, I mean, we go there with a lot of people from our bike club. We want to have fun. We want to ride together, and it's a good example. We all said, look, if it's snowing like that, we would have all stayed at home and drank beer probably. But we all went out. We all raced. We all actually succeeded in that we were actually, racing, and probably we were riding way faster than we would have otherwise. And that was fantastic. Pretty cold, but yeah, I don't have to tell you about that, Pascal.
Yeah, no, and it's it is again. It's also one of my favorite events here in the Alps. It's just the vibe is obviously slightly different than at an EWS, just because of the slightly less strict interpretation of the rules. So like there's no strict timing, and you can. But in the liaisons, you can take your time, and but on the other hand, it's not like the racing is easy. It's just that it's long stages. I mean, I think the Saturday is 4 or 5 stages, and none of the stages is less than 10 minutes, and 2 of them are more than 15 minutes. So it's some pretty full-on alpine racing. So I think it's pretty comparable, but of course the experience is slightly different than an EWS weekend. Something I would like to get into, and obviously something we like to explore with our guests, because this, after all, it is a podcast about mountain biking in Switzerland, is, of course, you live in Zermatt, but the real question is, where do you like riding when you're not riding in Zermatt at home?
Yeah, I think I do like the Valley. I like to ride here. I like to go to Verbier. As I mentioned, I kind of like this mix between bike park and single track. My wife loves the bike park. She hates every uphill, so that kind of determines also where we go on holidays and so on. But I would say like Verbier, Graumontana, like even Lötschental, there's so many hidden gems also, like far away from the bike parks. And I like the Valais for sure. And I'm slowly exploring the rest of Switzerland, right?
Okay. And I think one of the questions we like to ask is like, we know that you like to say you don't guide, but if you have guests, from overseas, wherever they're from, maybe from the US or from Canada, actually, where do you bring them to show the best riding Switzerland has to offer? Apart from Zermatt. You're not allowed to say Zermatt.
Oh, that's a pity, because I know everything here, so that would be the easiest. But honestly, I love everything around Visp, the area of Visp. It just offers so much. It's easy to access, and if they're good riders, I would probably take them off to the Haute Route, like Verbier to Zermatt. We'll leave the last day in Zermatt then, if I'm not allowed to guide them here. But it's really cool. Like going from valley to valley, you have a big like uphill, sometimes carrying your bike, and beautiful vistas, and really showcases Switzerland. Yeah.
Okay, nice. I'll put that on my bucket list right now. Done. All right. You live in Zermatt. It's not only great for riding a bike. It's also one of the nicest areas to ski. You do ski, I understand. But we've had a theme of like this co-inspiration between these big mountain sports, right? So kind of on the one hand, skiing, snowboarding, which is kind of this big mountain experience. You're out there challenging yourself to climb the mountain, riding it down in your free, creative way. And it's, then with mountain biking, it's kind of a similar thing, depending on how you like to ride. So what, for you, what inspires your riding more? Is it the mountain biking is kind of inspiring the skiing, or is it more the other way around?
You know, it's funny you should mention this choosing of the lines, you know, in skiing and snowboarding, because what I really love about mountain biking is that you actually follow each other. You actually, you know, you're riding with each other much more than, say, skiing or like free riding does. You know, you actually see the mistakes and the genius lines and the genius moves that the person in the front of you does. You can actually feel them, you know, accelerating, getting away from you, and so on. You know, I think that is just amazing, and I haven't like seen that in any other sport, that you can actually observe each other, you know, so closely while still like having fun and doing your own thing and inspire each other, you know, riding behind each other and riding in a big group and so on. So that is, to me, that is like cooler than skiing, I would say.
Nice.
This is a perspective I've never heard, and it makes so much sense, actually. You've given me an epiphany.
There you go.
There you go. Well, I guess on that positive note, unless you have anything else you would like to add to the conversation.
I'm just really happy to have been able to kind of explain my side of the the EWS Sunday. You know, maybe there is always a lot of chatter going on in the pits. There is a lot of chatter on social media. To me, in my position, I hear all that. I hear it quite loud, but I need to focus on what the rescue team tells me. I need to focus on, my spies on the mountain. I have a couple people that, are in the race and know the mountain very well and know the rescue team very well. And these are my guys, my go-tos where I can kind of feel the temperature. And sometimes it's not easy, to have this chatter from the pits, not being too loud. And for everybody outside of, the race office, they obviously just hear the chatter. So, I'm happy to have been able to kind of explain a little bit what, went on behind the curtains.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. I think we really enjoyed the insights into and the challenges of what looked like a pretty gnarly year to be organizing a race, given the global pandemic as well as the entire weather situation. But I guess on a more lighthearted note, I think we go to our closeout questions. We're getting a little bit towards the end of our time. We have three relatively lighthearted questions. I think Bryson will beg to differ on the lightheartedness, but mine are certainly a little bit lighthearted. So maybe with the first one, we've talked about, of course, the biking in Zermatt and the fantastic destinations, but we haven't really talked about bikes yet. So maybe if you could tell us a little bit about that first bike that got you really stoked about riding mountain bikes.
Yeah. I must say it wasn't a bike that I owned, but it was a bike that my buddy lent me. And it was an Iron Horse Sunday. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Man, a classic.
Yeah, it's a goodie. And my friend, he used to race downhill, so it was like specced out, and it was in prime conditions. So what happened is that my brother-in-law, he's Canadian, and he came for a visit, and he said, okay, we have to check out Finale Ligure. Get yourself a bike, and we go down there. So that was basically my introduction to actual, trail riding on that Iron Horse. And everybody kept saying, oh yeah, Sam Hill's ride, and so on. And I had no idea what they were talking about. And it was so cool, like learning about all that, after the fact. And I was hooked from then on.
Oh wow, yeah. I mean, that's not only a fantastic bike, but also genius location to get started in trail riding. Okay, wow, that's a good one, a new one. Second question from me: imagine you're Harry Skidini and you're a bike magician extraordinaire. You can make riding a mountain bike more awesome for anyone by the stroke of a magic dropper post. What would you do?
Oh, it's easy. Build it and they will come. Man, we need more infrastructure. We need especially infrastructure, good trails, good like skill centers for young people, kids, families to get into it. And then, once they're hooked, I think, we have a bunch more. I don't know if they can deliver the bikes that are going to be on demand at these times, but I think that's the key, yeah.
By the time we've built all that infrastructure, the bikes should be here.
Yeah, that's right.
So imagine yourself in the grandstands, and everywhere around you, everybody's cheering. Everyone's rah! We're gonna make this happen. You're expecting this gladiator to come out, and he's gonna pull the most perfect skid. Please describe what you see.
I can't tell you what it technically needs for the most perfect skid. I just know that like what it means to have pulled off such a skid is when not just yourself or not just the rider is smiling, but everybody around, can feel that buzz. And I mean, that's what constantly happens, right? When we do these things, I think that is then that's proof that you did the perfect skid.
I'm feeling that for sure.
Yeah.
There you go. Skits and giggles. Well, Nik, thanks again for sitting down with us tonight. This was really, really cool. If listeners have any questions or want to get in touch with you, want to learn more about you and your jobs, what are you up to? Where can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, we've just launched the Swiss Enduro series, which people should definitely check out. SwissEnduro.ch. They will find my details on there. And I really hope to see a lot of people at the races.
All right. Well, again, that was awesome. Thank you very much again. And we'll see you out there, hopefully soon.
See you on the trails. Thank you, Bryson.
Cheers, Nik.
Thank you, Pascal. Cheers.